Hey there, YouTube. I'm Kitsu. This is the Kitsu Times. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to a little bit of Sins of Solar Empire 2. So today we're going to be talking about the Ankylon Titan. I pronounce it Ankylon because it rolls off the tongue a little bit better, and the Ankylon sounds really stupid, so I'm not going to pronounce it that way. Let's get into this thing. So I don't really use the Tech Enclave Titan because I don't play enough games that the Titan comes up. Like Advent, I play just through sheer volume enough games as the Advent that their Titan comes into it. That's not really true for any of the other factions, where I'll dabble with them a little bit, but I pretty much never explore like this deep into their tech tree because I'll have usually won the game well before I get to here. And when I do get these, I just use them like a big dumb brick. So I don't really know exactly what you're supposed to do with them. So if you've got an opinion about neat tricks that you can do with this thing, you can give me a shout there. But let's I think the way that I'm using them when I do use them has been correct, but we'll find out. Anyway, these things, 750 durability, 6,000 shield points, 5,750 armor points. I believe their base armor value is 5,500. They get some extra armor point value from the base techs here. So we're never going to... Well, you can actually revert to that if you destroy all of your tech buildings, but don't do that. 14,520 hull points and 455 antimatter. It's got 130 armor strength, which is really, really good, and it's got 575 maximum speed, which is really, really bad. And its weapons are also quite bad. You've got 16 heavy autocannons at 10 damage per second with 250 pierce for a total of 160 damage per second. You can see where they're located. They're on the tops of these towers along the sides here. Surprisingly decent firing arcs on a bunch of these. You're able to actually get pretty good fire, although it does tend to fire broadside, so you're never going to get 100% of these guns onto any given target there. It's a shame you can't have this thing so that it's like fighting on its side or something like that. That'd be very funny. Anyhow, the other weapons, you got 18 PD autocannons. That's at 4 damage per second with 0 pierce. That's, I believe, 72 damage per second from the autocannon PD. Now, the PD on this used to be really, really good, but with the addition of some of the more PD-focused command ships, I feel like this sort of lost a little bit of that identity there. Has good coverage, has good arcs on those. That's, pretty decent as far as point defense goes, but I think there are currently some ships out there that are a little bit better for what you're paying for in terms of point defense. And I think that this thing obviously could use a little bit more. You got like a gap here. There should be another point defense gun there and another one there. Like why would you not do that there? And why would you not have them on these ends here for something this big, this fortressy? It's got some dead spots on its point defense grid. So yeah, a little bit odd, a little bit strange, but it's how they decided to do it here. Now, we'll have to talk about the items right now here a little bit. The guns of this are modular. You're not really expected to just go into battle with the guns that you've got here. You've got a couple options there. You've got the hangar. The Ankylon hangar gives you 15 extra squadrons, which is an absolutely crazy amount of squadrons, but this isn't really a carrier. I don't think this is the best option for it, and it's not the one that I would particularly choose. You get the Ankylon beams. These are at tier 4, and they appear here. You can see 4 like this, and then 4 like this. Those are extremely powerful. Each of those beams is 60 damage per second with 500 pierce, and you get 8 of them for a total of 480 damage per second. Unfortunately, you're never going to get more than 4 of them on target for a total of 240 damage per second, but that's still a very, very powerful weapon system. That's quite good on this thing here. The next one are the Ankylon missile batteries. And you can see where they show up here. They come up on the sides, on the broadsides. They also come in these smaller groups on the front and on the back over here. So you get a lot of missile launchers off of this thing here. Total damage for this is a little bit janky. You've got 133 damage per second on this side and 133 damage per second on this side. And then your front and rear are 53.4 each. So the total amount of damage per second that you're getting off of this thing is around 370 damage per second, which is pretty good. That extra damage does stack up pretty fast. Primarily broadside is a little bit awkward, but this thing kind of tends to fight broadsides anyway. Very, very good amounts of damage from this, but clearly it's designed if you want to maximize the damage to run straight into the middle of the enemy fleet, where hopefully it'll be fine because it is an extraordinarily tanky ship. Like, this is very, very tough to kill. But yeah, its weapons really do assume that you're going to get, like, at the very least the beams, because that alone puts you sort of on par with a lot of the other command ships out there, or the Titans that are out there in terms of your damage per second. The fact that you can't converge them does suck a little bit. The fact that none of your weapons are anti-Titan does also suck a little bit, but this thing's offense, I think, is a little bit underestimated. It's a little bit better at offense than people give it credit for. Very, very good at just intimidating and just wiping out enemy capital ships there. So for abilities, we're looking at the Disruption Matrix is our first one, and I do have to look up the numbers for this because there's two sets of numbers and there's quite a few of them. Cooldown of 45 seconds, antimatter cost of 90, and it has a scaling duration. 5, 10, and 15 seconds at maximum level. That's the only scaling for this, so that's a little bit easy actually, but what this does is it deals damage per second in a radius around it to enemy ships there. So 5 seconds of damage for 100 damage per second in enemy or neutral gravity wells is pretty good. You do 150 damage per second in a larger radius. This is the larger radius that we're seeing here. In friendly gravity wells, that's a huge amount of damage, and especially once you scale this up to the point where it's doing the full damage for 15 seconds in a friendly gravity well, you're looking at something that can kill a lot of frigates in 2 casts, and you're certainly going to kill corvettes in 1 in most situations there. So this is an extremely, extremely potent way of clearing out a lot of the lighter ships there. However, its damage against heavier targets is really lackluster, so this isn't the strongest of abilities. However, it comes with a secondary ability that's quite good. If you can get the cooldown to this, it's even better. So there is an artifact that you could find that would make Disruption Matrix actually really, really good. But this also prevents enemies from casting during that period of time. So if you get it up to the 15 seconds, you reduce your own cooldown time. You can really mess with enemy casting. It's not the best anti-cast ability out there, but the amount of damage that it's doing to lighter ships combined with the fact that it's a big AoE anti-cast makes it so that you could potentially like snag a bunch of Antrak Marauders or something like that are trying to use phase out to do annoying things. You can stop a bunch of reveries from happening. And while that's sort of going on, while you've got that Disruption Matrix, it gives you that opening with your ships that might otherwise get completely disabled to use some of their abilities there. Like maybe you need your Marza to be able to use its missile barrage unmolested so that it can deal a whole ton of damage to the enemy fleet there, and after it's cast that, you don't really care anymore. Disruption Matrix can give you that sort of opening to be able to cast that. Quite a good ability. It's the more powerful of the offensive options in a lot of situations there, but it's obviously not meant to like close out big fights against larger capital ships or anything like that. Next ability here is Furious Defense. Has a cooldown of 90 seconds, scales down to 60 at maximum level, and antimatter cost is 125, scaling down to 75. So duration of 60 seconds, which is constant. This means that at maximum level, this is a 100% uptime ability. And what it does is it increases the damage that the Ankylon itself does, and it also regenerates his hull and armor. So plus 10% weapon damage in enemy and neutral, and this scales up to 30% at maximum. Hull and armor regeneration goes from 50 to 100 to 150 per second, which is really strong. Extremely high healing from this thing. And in friendly gravity wells, those numbers are just flatly doubled. So 20 damage per second increase, 60% at maximum level there. With the 60%, you're dealing a ridiculous amount of damage with this thing. It's capable of absolutely shredding through enemy fleets if you've got all the other upgrades there. The regeneration values also change to 100, 200, 300, which is also extremely, extremely strong. If you're on the armor plating value, and this thing can get very high armor ratings, you can become ridiculously difficult to deal with if you've got that 150 regenerating armor per second, because you're getting functionally way more than that in terms of how much that actually gives you. The next ability here is Shield Surge. This one is a large area of effect here that basically does a burst of shield restore for yourself and for all of the ships around you. So the Ankylon itself gets back a huge amount of shields from this. You got a cooldown of 25 seconds. You got an antimatter cost of 100. I'm just going to double check here because I can't remember the numbers for this one. But I believe the scaling on this is pretty good, actually. Yeah, so you got a cooldown of 25 seconds. It scales down to 15 seconds at maximum level. Antimatter cost is 100, goes down to 50 at maximum level. This becomes a fairly good burst. Radius of 8,500, which I believe is constant here. I think it is. Anyway, yeah, so if you're in a neutral or enemy gravity well, the Ankylon itself restores 1,000, 1,500 or 2,000 shields on cast, while your allies restore 200, 300, or 400. But if you're in a friendly gravity well, those numbers are 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 on yourself. And your allies get 300, 450, and 600. By allies, they mean like any ship that is not the Ankylon that is friendly to you. So this is a pretty good fleet support ability. This is just like kind of worse than what you're getting back from motherships. And mothership like shield healing is extremely insanely good. Obviously, this is also better for the Ankylon itself compared to what a mothership is doing. This makes it so that every 15 seconds you're getting back like 4,000 hit points. That's absolutely crazy amounts of regeneration. Still, though, like you're not going to keep the rest of your fleet alive super well shield surge, and ideally you use this when the Ankylon itself is getting attacked. Now, all this sort of culminates in its ultimate ability, these other two abilities here, where you take a ton of damage and heal it on the ship itself. Invulnerability field has a cooldown of 4 minutes, antimatter cost of 150, radius is 8,500. If you're in a neutral or enemy gravity well, it lasts for 30 seconds, granting invulnerability to all of your ships except for the Ankylon itself. This is a really good ability. If your opponent is not focusing on this thing, you can sort of pop this and make it so that the rest of your fleet has time to deal a bunch of damage, use a bunch of their abilities, and clean up a bunch of the enemy, reducing their damage per second output by enough that like once this sort of ends, you end up in a situation where it's like your opponent now has to decide, okay, well, I had to spend that 30 seconds dealing a bunch of damage to the Ankylon. Do I try to finish it off, or do I keep hitting it at this point in time? Do I commit to beating it, or do I fight the rest of the tech fleet? And this can be especially bad if you've also got a bunch of Tachiderans to deal with, because they'll be reducing the damage, but more importantly, they'll be still building like your fleet back up. So the tech fleet could sort of be in the sort of situation where they're sort of endless there. So you kind of have to destroy, like at that point, the Tachiderans, and they're tough. If you're sort of forced into a situation where it's like you're gonna attack a Tachideran and try and take it out there, and every 4 minutes you're forced to attack the Ankylon instead. That's a lot of time for them to regain all their shields from like shield surge or something like that. So it can get pretty rough out there as far as trying to actually decide what you're going to do to deal with invulnerability field. This also is 60 seconds long if you're in a friendly gravity well. The Ankylon is one of those ships that really benefits if it's capable of getting a reduction on its cooldowns from an artifact or something like that. If you can get the one that has your cooldowns, this becomes extremely potent to the point where it's almost like a broken sort of Titan as far as that goes. Very powerful to put that kind of item on. Now, let's take a look at our techs here. This is a ship that benefits a lot from that advanced crew training, having that level 2 at the start. Like I said, your abilities are really good. Being able to sort of pick 2 of them, and more importantly, being closer to level 3 so you can stack a second level in one of them, does make this thing a lot more viable and a lot more powerful, so you definitely want to get that if you can. As far as our weapon tech goes, yeah, you can get a lot of value from getting like refined propellants and all of these sort of bonuses to your autocannon damage, but this thing, its damage doesn't really come from those at the end of the day. Your beam damage increases are very strong. This is going to be fairly consistent for you. Now, we have to sort of show something here. The weapon systems that this thing gets and unlock primarily at tier 5. So if you're in a situation where you're stuck at tier 4, you're not going to have access to the extra armor plating 2 or 3. You're not going to have access to those missile launchers, which is really important. You're not getting the planetary shield, which has some fringe benefits there. You're stuck in this case with the beam turrets, with the hangar blueprints, and the tier 1 extra armor plating, which is substantially weaker than if you're able to get access to the missile launcher. So your builds, depending on which way you're capable of going, are going to vary quite a lot. And you may want to respec its equipment based on whether or not if you get stuck at tier 4, you go for a specific type of kit there. And if you manage to push into tier 5, maybe you throw out a bunch of items and then redo it at that point in time. So in any event, though, suffice to say, rapid autoloader not always going to be reliably good for this thing. And you generally speaking don't care too much about the refined propellants or anything like that there. The missiles are also quite good for this thing, though. Again, if you are getting them, you do need to have that sort of Tech 5. So it is quite nice that you're capable of getting all the way up to 30% with that, but a little bit expensive for what you're getting there. You do also get access to armor missiles. That's not super important. These are all heavy missile launchers. They're very hard to point defense down already. So saying that they are even harder to point defense down really doesn't help too much there. The missile guidance computer is actually really good. These missiles are very slow, and you've got a lot of them, so you tend to overkill targets pretty badly. The missile guidance computer stops that from being as much of a problem there. The extended range missiles, typically not that big a problem for the Ankylon. I think you're supposed to fly this into the middle of the enemy fleet. For engineering, I think that the repellent premium armor is going to be the biggest and most important thing. If you're capable of getting that high regeneration on this thing, then having access to that extra 50 armor adds a lot of extra durability to this thing, especially as well when you get things like the reactive plating blueprint or the ablative armor blueprint, depending on what you're up against there. I do think there's a special shout out for advanced maneuvering. This thing's already really slow. You want to give it as much of an advantage as you can in getting around the place, and this does make it a little bit better at maneuvering there. Hull points, ideally you never actually take hull point damage. You don't want to take hull point damage with this thing, because if you're getting down to that point where you're seeing red, you're taking a lot of damage. It's pretty scary there. This isn't the most antimatter hungry one, although there are some builds, especially the shield ability. If you're going for that, you absolutely need this, otherwise it's not as important there. Although antimatter engine might be necessary if you are going for the full-on shield type build there. Speaking of, the backup shield generator and the enhanced shield cohesion are extremely good for the ship, just because you're going to be stuck on armor for a really long time, so you're going to get extra shields. So you're going to be doing several of these shield bursts and getting back your shields from that several times. Now, as far as civilian research goes, you're just getting the speed. That's really all that you get out of this tree here. Not really a huge deal for this thing. It's still going to be slow as a snail. You're still going to get caught and potentially die if you're not careful there. So let's take a look at a couple different builds for this thing. First one would be focusing on Disruption Matrix. This would be if you're trying to just fly straight into the enemy fleet there and pop Disruption Matrix to destroy a bunch of their lighter ships, but also to make it so that their capitals have a harder time casting their abilities. Maybe something like, say, the Guardians are also having a harder time using their defense ability. There's a couple different things that this can use that are all quite useful there. So this one I would pair primarily with Furious Defense, because you're going to be flowing into the middle of the enemy fleet there. So I'd go primarily this, and then I'd go secondary Furious Defense, and then maybe I'd go even on Furious Defense and Shield Surge, just because unlocking them unlocks a lot of power, but I'd probably just go double Furious Defense at level 5. For the build, I would basically be going for the beams, definitely, and ideally the missile launcher. This is one of those builds where I would only really take it if I had access to tier 5. If I don't have access to tier 5, I'm probably not going to bother going for it. So you're looking at the beams, you're looking at the Ankylon missiles, you're looking at core systems armor, extra armor plating, the extra armor plating 2 and 3, and then of course you're looking at reactive plating or something of that sort there. After that, it's a little bit up in the air. I think that you could easily get something like a rapid autoloader. But if you wanted to, you could get something like, say, the volatile accelerants to make it so that this thing's capable of getting in there a little bit more easily. I don't think you really need the antimatter engine. This doesn't really spend too much as far as antimatter goes. But if you're getting drained by advent sort of stuff there, then antimatter engine could be really good. You could take the planetary shield array if that's something that you find yourself needing there. And there is an argument to be made for combat repair system. If you're in a situation where you do bounce through your armor and take hull damage, you'll start healing hull from Furious Defense instead of healing armor. Or if you're up against something like, say, the what's it called? Like the Justicia, and it does a 3% damage spike straight to your hull. The combat repair system can patch up the entire hull really, really, really quickly so that you haven't lost those thousands of hit points because it's a percentage. So that would put you back into the point where you're capable of healing armor instead with your Furious Defense, which can be important in some of those instances there. You could also just take armor patches. You could take a lot of different things with this thing for your final item, whatever you feel like sort of rounding yourself out with there. Now, you could even take the missile guidance computer if you plan on being like well outside the radius of other ships that could potentially support you with that. The next build would be one that focuses on Furious Defense. I think that if you're going for this primarily, you ideally speaking are going to be doing sort of the same thing. So this would be the same as the Disruption Matrix one, except you're more focused on destroying enemy capital ships and having a little bit better sustain. I would build this the exact same way. The only difference is I would flip the level 3 to Furious Defense and then go for a level 2 Disruption Matrix. The last one is Shield Surge. This is the only one where I'm going to say the antimatter engine is very important because you're going to be spending that down really, really fast. Even though it does become more cost efficient as you level it, but I would go for like level 3 Shield Surge, and then I would go for Furious Defense because it's a little bit easier on the antimatter compared to Disruption Matrix. Now, the one thing about Furious Defense, though, is that you do ideally want this just for the healing effect at that point in time, because this is the build that I would go for if I don't feel confident that I can get access to Tier 5 tech. In this case, what you're, of course, going to get is the Ankylon beams, but you have much more reason to take sort of the more supportive type stuff there. So getting access to something like the hangar there, you need access to the core systems armor. You can only get the first tier extra armor plating, the reactive plating. At that point in time, you're looking at getting the antimatter engine. After that, you're sort of rounding yourself off with whatever else you need, maybe like volatile nanites, or you could even get the war reporters or something like that, because this is the build that you don't want to fly straight into the enemy. You want to be staying with the rest of your fleet in cohesion with them. And because of that, you're not going to be as durable. You're not going to be as hard hitting. You're not going to be able to use your weapons as effectively. So in that particular case, it's kind of okay to not have access to something like the missile batteries and to not have as much defense packed on there. Now, if I was going for the Shield Surge ability primarily and going for the Furious Defense secondary, and I did have access to Tier 5, I would absolutely still get the missiles. I would consider getting something like the guidance computer, and I would consider getting the targeting array. The reason that the targeting array becomes important in this instance is because we're fighting with the rest of our fleet there. So being able to have this thing fire while not necessarily in the most ideal of positions, and have that sort of extra range kick in to keep us like in the middle of our own fleet while still firing off all of our stuff from long distances, that all does come in handy there. I would still, of course, get the reactive plating. I would still get like the extra armor plating 1, but we don't need to go as deep into defense as we did previously there. So yeah, that's primarily how I would build this thing. Now, I think that the way that you use this thing is that it's a big dumb brick and it's capable of just sort of like absorbing huge amounts of damage from the enemy while throwing out like very powerful supportive type abilities, or just dealing with enemy capital ships. Well, not necessarily being like the biggest threat in the game there, it's big enough of a threat with enough damage per second. It's obtrusive enough and it's got like powerful enough abilities through like all this stuff here that the enemy does want to do something about it, but primarily speaking, it's like so obnoxious to deal with that you'd rather deal with like the rest of the fleet instead, but then you can force them to deal with it with the invulnerability field. That's how I feel like you sort of use this thing here. You want it to be as tough as possible so they can actually do that without them just saying, okay, well, I'll just kill the Ankylon. And I think that you have to be really careful about it actually on the move, because if you get too spread out, like the rest of your fleet is way, way ahead of this thing on a movement, and they intercept it with like a large number of, say, like Destras. Let's say it gets caught up by 60 Destras or something like that. This thing could go down surprisingly quickly from that kind of attack. And as a result of that, like if you lose it in that sort of situation, it's very, very slow. It's very difficult to recover from that sort of situation where you've been caught out and you are getting actually significantly damaged by an enemy type of ship there. So you'd want to make sure that it's being supported by the rest of its fleet, and that you're not like positioning it poorly. I think that that's sort of how this sort of works here. I think this is one of the ones where it's like you just, if you've got the ability to have your fleet on the move coordinated move in formation, that probably would be one of the more important things to do with this one, just because like if it gets caught by itself, it can actually get ground down over time. You'll be in a rush to sort of bring your fleet back so you can save this thing. But yeah, I think it's pretty dead simple. I don't think this is a very complicated ship at all, as far as the role that it has or how it works. But yeah, if there's some weird trick to it that people know, there's some sort of weird synergy that they're capable of doing, I'd love to hear about it, because I haven't really thought of anything too clever that you can do with it. But in any event, hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.